So what's the road look like to monetization? Because I understand everything that you did, but I mean, you could make 1,000 threads about what Naval said or what Joe Rogan said or what these guys said, but like, how do you actually make money from it?
So I went from doing that accountability cohort with Ship 30, and all it was a Slack channel. And then from there, I said, I got to charge something. But I was so terrified too, so I charged $50 and I gave everyone their money back if they finished all 30 days. Because the first time you charge anything, like literally, and I'm here with like a spreadsheet counting people's posts. Do I give them their money back? Like, did they finish everything? Wiring money in and out, like getting flagged by PayPal.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, clearly I'm onto something. And I held one-on-one interviews with every single person who went through that initial cohort. And they all said, dude, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I want to write, but I want to surround myself with other people who are at the same stage on the journey as I am. And so the next cohort was $99. And then that was going into January of 21. And I think it got 200, 300 people. So I made 30 grand in that first cohort.
Yeah.
And my goal when I started to write was to make $10,000 on the internet in a year. Because it was like $1,000 at the time. Yeah, I was making 100 grand or 150 as a Wall Street worker, whatever. But that does not go a far way in New York City. Rent, taxes, all of that. Like my after tax, after expenses take home was like a couple $100 a month. I'm like, this is a scam on top of all the other things. Like I've been
in New York City.
Exactly. And so that completely broke my brain. But before that, I had done some ghostwriting services where I was making, $5K for a client here and there. But the first true monetization where it was that January Ship 30 cohort.
Which is awesome. What are some of the guys, like Christian was asking, like success stories? Like, are there any like star students that stick out from that original cohort?
From that original cohort, it's kind of like picking children, where if I went and sat down and looked at this, I would say right now on Twitter, there are at least, I would wager, we haven't done enough numbers actually breaking it down, but 20 to 25 people with over 100 to 200,000 followers that have taken Ship 30 at some point. Wow. Now, what the beautiful part about it is, a lot of people will take it and that's all they needed was that initial spark. And then they go find their own direction, right? Some go on LinkedIn, some go on Instagram, some they write for 2 days and they land a new client for their whatever business. And they write to me 6 months later and say, hey man, I just want you to know, I didn't finish all 30 days of Ship 30, but all it took was me to write 3 pieces. And now all this X, Y, and Z happened.
Yeah. So the monetization model was showing other people how to write online, right? Which is what Dan was getting after. Yeah. So what's the sales pitch or what's the pitch to anyone out there as to why they should write online if they're not going to sell their own program, of why others should write online?
I would say because this conversation is only happening because I've been putting out content on the internet. I would say the 15 people that I talk to the most on a weekly basis at this point, I met because I wrote something and they liked it and we had a conversation afterwards.
Yeah.
And for anyone who, we talk about this, where when you're growing up, you're limited to the people on your street or at your school or on your sports team. And for a lot of us, myself especially, I never fully clicked with a lot of those people. I saw the world potentially a different way. I think I have an obsessive personality, which you find other people on the internet because of that. And so I would say you unlock the opportunity where the internet democratizes access to good friendship, where you can find people who are interested in the same things as you, but you have to go and put yourself out there with all the ideas. Right? So we're friends because we're interested in similar things. But if someone has a hyper niche interest where they look around their entire school and think they're a complete weirdo, they might be, but they
like, look at this coldie.
Right, exactly. Right. But then you put things out there and you find 100, 200 other people who are interested in the same thing.
Yeah.
That's the biggest pitch, is the relationships that it unlocks, which then goes to unlock everything else.
Yep. So my question is, I obviously write cold emails and I have a really hard time teaching someone else how to write, because sales, there's like frameworks you can follow. I mean, I know you're going to tell me that there's templates and frameworks, but a lot of things have X's and O's, whereas writing is just like, it can go any which way. So how do you silo your teachings and show someone how to really write properly? Or not properly, but in a way that garners attention?
There are a couple different directions you could go with that. First would be the basic copywriting frameworks.
Yeah.
The ADA frameworks, those are the basics that you study, you read the books, you see it in action, and you go, okay, wow, okay. That's kind of what clicked for me, because I was a computer science math major. I hated writing in school. I took one freshman English class and never wanted to write again. But once I realized it's kind of like programming, but you figure out small tweaks and templates to use. That's on the tactical side. I would say for anyone who's uncomfortable writing in general, stop trying to write and just record yourself having a conversation and just write those words down. And that's your initial writing voice. And then, yeah, you can tweak it to make it more persuasive or more emphatic and more interesting.
Sure.
But that's how I got my start was I don't know how to put words down on a page. Why don't I just talk and transcribe it?
Is that like the first module?
First thing. Yeah. In Ship 30, we say start just having a conversation about whatever it is you're interested in with a friend and record it. And there's going to be 10 content ideas and the exact words that you should use.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more natural to just have a discussion with someone else.
Right.
Instead of just, that's been my thing always, is instead of trying to speak directly to an audience, it's so much easier like in a conversation like this where you're just bouncing off each other's ideas and flowing that way. I guess one of my questions is like, one of the objections or things that comes to mind of like, okay, write online, but about what?
About what? When you say, okay. So we call this the 2-year test. 2 years is the easiest way to figure out what you should write about. And so I'll use you guys for example. And if you remember from the keynote, I did it with Daniel.
Larry, for anyone watching this, Dickie came through to our event in Tampa last year, the Client Ascension event.
Right there. No, it'll be on the page.
There's not going to be a way to link it here.
Yeah.
But if you said it's the #1 video on your YouTube channel, right? So if you just look up Dickie Bush's YouTube channel, the #1 video is almost at 10K views, was the keynote from our event. And Dan, the first thing you said when we walked in is like, guys in our program still talk about that.
Because they come in with the same limiting belief that like you somewhat expressed a minute ago of like, hey, like writing is so like, it's all creative, this and that. And you broke it down so tactically that it's like, hey, this is literally a foolproof plan. Here's an abundance of proof that it works.
Yeah.
Here's exactly how you do it. And like sit down for 30 minutes and you'll be able to come up with 100 pieces of content.
I'd say the #1 thing holding people back from writing is getting over the fear of sharing something that's completely and utterly obvious to you, but incredibly valuable to other people.
Yeah.
So every one of us have a unique set of experiences, hobbies, skills, life transitions that they could write about. But because we live every day with all of those sitting top of mind, we're like, no one would possibly care about what I have to say. So we call it the 2-year test, where you just look back and you list out basically everything you've done over the last 2 years. So skills, hobbies, whatever you've done. And those are your potential things to talk about. And we don't need to go down the full like 4A framework. People can go watch that if they want to. But getting what I should write about is just talk about what you've done. I tweeted the other day, most of success on the internet is just doing things in the real world and then talking about them.
Yep.
So figure out what you've done in the real world over the last 2 years and then go talk about it, because so few people actually do that you stand out if you say, hey, here's what I've done and here's what's working for me and here's what I'm interested in.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this short clip, check out the full interview here. And if you want to see more clips from this episode, check it out right here.